Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast, our instant reaction from Ohio State's 52-17 win over Nebraska. By way of introduction, I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr, who is in Ohio Stadium. Tom, first of all, how was it being in the stadium for this game?
It was just absolutely delightful to be here for it. It was after the game, Ryan Day and Kerry Combs and Wyatt Davis were all asked, what was it like? And I think everyone just said, yeah, it was just kind of weird. It was a little different. I mean, you had big moments that normally you hear, you could hear the roar over on Lane Avenue, and there was no roar today. It was like a big play in practice in a lot of ways. But there were TV cameras here, and the game counted, so it was not quite like a big play, just a big play in practice. There were elements of this, and I'm going to be writing about this probably later tonight for BuckeyeScoop.com, but there were elements of this that felt exactly like an Ohio State football game. I got here, and it was like overcast and about 40 degrees and a little breezy, and it was like, oh man, does this ever feel like a college football Saturday in Columbus, Ohio? And then, there was stuff that was like, you didn't have the roar of the crowd. You didn't have, the marching band. You're watching a recorded version of the marching band's ramp entrance. You're watching a recorded version of the marching band's halftime show. There's no Brutus. There's no cheerleaders. The stands are empty. I kept looking up, like, it wasn't even like fourth quarter of the spring game stands. It was just empty stands. And I think the most jarring moment of the day for me came before the game, when I was down in a double A deck, which is where they let photographers go before the game. I was down there just shooting some photos of warm-ups and that kind of stuff. And I was in one of the sections where they had some of the cardboard cutouts. And I was actually over on the side where they had all the cardboard cutouts from all of the Big Noon Saturday people. And one of our buddies from another outlet, said something to me, and I turned, and all of a sudden, just in my peripheral vision, there was a person right here, and I'm like, ah! And it was cardboard Rob Stone, and he scared the bejesus out of me, and so that was definitely my weirdest moment today. But it was very, very interesting to be here today. I mean, I think the official attendance was 1,300 and some change, and Jerry Emig, the SID, said that was definitely the fewest people since at least the Ohio Field expansion in 1910. And I think the official attendance figures maybe a little bit lost to time before then, but he said in 1901 there was an article that he found that someone had found that said that the football attendance had increased at a frightening rate. So it's probably sometime before 1901 then, if football attendance had increased at a frightening rate at that point. So yeah, this was a very different kind of Ohio State football game, but it was an Ohio State football game. And this year, in the year of our Lord 2020, that is just a wonderful thing to have.
Any kind of football game is a good football game. It didn't seem all that odd on television because they had the sound and all of that good stuff. So yeah, it and I'm watching Penn State and Indiana right now. It looks like it's completely normal. Because there are no crowd shots. You take that for what it is. That's what it's going to be. But after the game, players didn't seem all that. Yeah, it was different, but you just create your own energy. And that start, Nebraska. Let's talk about the game. Nebraska certainly brought their own energy right out of the gate. Ran the ball, 66 yards in 3 plays and had a 9-yard completion there on that first drive for the 75-yard touchdown drive, where we came into this game wanting to know how Ohio State was going to defend the quarterback run, and we found out right away they're not going to do it very well this year, at least on that one drive. But they solidified things after that. They finished with 377 total yards. 75 yards of that came on the first drive, and they had another 75-yard drive in the second quarter. And but that was about it. But that start, certainly concerning. But again, what to make of the first game? And we'll talk about that with the defense as well, with the running game and the Ohio State running game as well. But Um, I guess knowing that there are still issues with stopping that quarterback run will keep them busy. But also, these are two very talented running quarterbacks, and like I don't know how many guys like this they'll face this season. Maybe Michael Penix, Trevor Lawrence, of course. But a rough start. But Kerry Combs and Ryan Day both said they liked the answers and the responses, and I guess we'll have to go with that.
Yeah, there were a couple things that I when the clock hit zero, I thought, okay, here are some areas of real concern. And then Day and Combs both kind of just sort of poo-pooed him. It wasn't like, oh, no, it was great. You're wrong. It actually was good. It was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, first game stuff. And you go back to the first game of last year against Florida Atlantic. I mean, I don't have J.K. Dobbins' stats from that game right in front of me. Maybe you can pull them up while I'm talking. But I just remember coming away from that game like, yeah, it was fine. It wasn't, we had spent all summer gassing up J.K. Dobbins about how, every indication, like all indicators were blinking green on what a great year J.K. Dobbins was going to have. Like, came away from that first game like, it was fine, I guess. Like, it was all right. And then he ends up rushing for 2,000 yards in a season for the first time in Ohio State history. You don't want to read too much into that first game. And that's always true. But that's, I think, like doubly or triply true this year when you've had this weird disjointed practice schedule and guys they've been doing a lot less hitting on defense. You've been doing a lot less hitting on the offensive line. I mean, I think it was probably instructive that what looked the absolute best in the Ohio State offense, the passing game. Justin Fields goes 20 for 21. What have they been able to do all summer? Well, they've been able to do 7-on-7. Guess what? They've been able to work on the passing game all summer. The defense at times was like not up to the standard that they probably would like to be at the end of the year. And the offensive line, which hasn't been able to do any hitting for the vast majority of the summer, was not where you would want them to be at this point. But I think there's probably some correlation there that the people who could just have a normal year of practice looked like people who had a normal year of practice, and the people who were not able to do that looked the same.
Yeah, the running game last year, you mentioned J.K. Dobbins had 91 yards rushing on like 21 carries. The Buckeyes as a whole, 48 carries for 237 yards last year against Florida Atlantic. Today, 48 carries for 222 yards. So very, very similar. But getting back to the stopping of the quarterback run, it was a surprising 217 yards rushing for Nebraska, and 164 of that came from Luke McCaffrey and Adrian Martinez on 21 carries. So that's 8 yards a rush by those two guys, factored in any of the sacks that they succumbed to, or any of the bad snaps that McCaffrey had, or just even the negative plays. They were still up over around 8 yards a carry. So there is going to be that was an issue. Baron Browning had a rough start, I think, in that first drive, bounced back better in the second drive when they shut things down. And it's going to be something to monitor. And, when it's one game and something happens, we latch onto that, and then we just bang on it until something else catches our eyes because we're just looking for shiny objects. That's a pretty shiny object when two quarterbacks are rushing for nearly 200 yards on you, and that's basically their entire offense at this point was just running those two guys, doing a bunch of motion, trying to confuse Ohio State, and it worked, but 17 points. So.
Yeah, I think this game ended up basically almost exactly where you and I had both predicted it. I think I had 56-20 and you had 52-20. It ended up at 52-17. I mean, that's pretty darn close. We're both within about 10 points total.
Who was closer?
Well, but you went over, so neither of us was correct.
No,
no. So really, it's a tie. But we were both in the neighborhood. I think this ended up about where you expected. And Ryan Day was asked about that after the game. It was like, so were you happy with the defensive performance? And it was kind of like, well, there are issues there. That there's stuff they've got to get straightened out. But at the same time, they give up 17 points against what is presumably a pretty good offense. And you want to complain about giving up 17 points against a pretty decent offense in a Big Ten conference game? Like, I think they would take 17 points allowed in every single game this year. If you said you're going to give up 17 points, they would take that every game. And based on the offense we saw, I think they would win every single game and probably win every single game with a few touchdowns to spare.
Yeah, Day said he would have signed up for that right away if you said that you're only giving up 17 points. And there wasn't much damage done from the running backs. Dedrick Mills, 10 for 33. Tompkins, 4 for 22. So I think they handled that very well. The passing game, 160 yards, 16 of 20 combined for Martinez and McCaffrey, with a long of just a 26-yarder in there. The tight ends gave them some issues here and there. A lot of those play actions and bootlegs and stuff like that, which I think it just goes with the territory when you're trying to stop the run. So we need to see more. I'd like to have seen more from the defensive line, the defensive ends, specifically getting after these guys. But they didn't really throw the ball a lot, so there wasn't a lot of pass rushing to do. And I don't know how aggressive they were in getting after the quarterback today. I think they tried to. They didn't want to give up a whole bunch of big runs by the quarterbacks, with their aggression, and so maybe some of that was held back, and some of the blitzing and some of the more aggressive actions towards those guys was held back simply because containing them would be maybe the better course of action. And maybe you don't need to show everything the week before Penn State, and maybe you hold some stuff back for an offense that can maybe do more things down the field, has better skill with the receivers. That being said, I kept getting texts on my phone about how many open receivers Nebraska had down the middle of the field, and I'll have to go back and watch that. Maybe that's a concern. I think the safety issue is certainly Marcus Hooker, Josh Proctor. There is still some work to be done there, and I think this defense is still trying to figure out exactly what it is. And I don't know if one high is the hallmark for them this year based on just kind of what we saw today.
Yeah, there were some concerns with that definitely down the field. I don't know how much was visible on TV. I was in the front row of the press box. Just meant there was TVs like right above my head and like 10 feet down. So I had to stand up and walk down anytime I wanted to go look at one of these 17,000 Nebraska targeting calls. So yeah, we can talk about Nebraska defenders not having arms later in the show maybe, but there are definitely issues to work through. There was that first drive. There was that McCaffrey, whatever, 47-yard run or whatever it was, where I think Browning wasn't in the right spot. And then Marcus Hooker maybe overran the play a little bit. And it was like, oh man, Jordan Fuller, where art thou? But then it sort of settled down. And they did not give up any huge plays in the passing game. The longest pass was 26 yards. So, if you don't give up a 30-yard pass during the course of the game, like, your safety play is probably okay. It's not terrible. The skill they're going to face next week against Penn State is better. Like, the running back talent is better. The offensive line is probably as good or better. Like, it unquestionably gets more challenging next week. The quarterback just the throw game in the quarterback gets better next week with Penn State than it was with Nebraska this week. Now, how much better? I don't know. I have I keep getting text notifications on my phone popping up. Hey, you've got to turn on the Penn State Indiana game. Well, I'm actually recording a podcast right now, so I can't do that. But
I'm watching it if you would like to know.
They have the Alabama Tennessee game on here, so Tennessee not looking great. Alabama will do that to you. But yeah, I don't want to put too much on anything in the first week. I think that this is something that we heard from Day earlier in the week was, he's not necessarily worried about getting burned on something once. It's more, don't get beaten with the same thing multiple times. And they really did. Nebraska had that first drive where they went right down the field, marched right down the field, and it was like, oh man, here we go. This is going to be, hope you bet the over. And then it stopped. And then it didn't, and they ended up with 17 points. They were up. They had 7 points. A minute and 51 seconds into the game, and then for the last almost 58 minutes, 58 minutes and change, they scored 10 more points. So, and it wasn't like they were constantly driving down the field and in the red zone and then getting stopped. Like there were a whole bunch of 3 and outs in the middle of the game where Ohio State seemed like, okay, they sort of figured out what Nebraska was doing and can adjust. And with as good as this Ohio State offense is, you can have a bad drive and give up a touchdown. And, this is not like trestle ball where it's like, oh, they're down 7-0. I hope they can scrap together 13 points in the next 3 quarters to overcome that. They'll, this offense is going to put up points. If they don't get beat by something 4 times and they just get beat by something once, that's okay. And that's sort of what the season on the whole is. You can have, don't get beat by the same stuff next week that you got beat with today. Just be ready for Penn State probably looking at some of the stuff that Nebraska did and maybe trying to do something with that.
It felt like a close game for so long. Then Ohio State scores 10 in the second quarter to go up 24-14 at the half, and then add another 14 of that right in the third quarter, and they just at that point it was over. Like I think it was the Seven Banks touchdown that really just ended things. I think that made it 38-14, and there was no longer any stress at that point. It was just this overwhelming thing where Ohio State was never all that great, completely defensively and offensively, and then in the span of not even 2 quarters, the game is now it's a blowout, and Ohio State is on the verge of covering. And I guess that's maybe just what the talent disparity between Ohio State and Nebraska and Ohio State and most of the rest of the Big Ten is going to be, where they don't have to play their A game to cover. And I think that's what this was. Although, they were already covering after that before that last touchdown. I don't know. It may have finished at like minus 28. The Buckeyes were, depending on where you were. And Ryan Day apologized at the end for that final touchdown because they had Jack Miller in there, and I guess Jack Miller hasn't really taken the kneel down and wasn't accustomed to that. And just the logistics of getting him out and putting Justin Fields in to take a knee, they didn't really want to do. So he apologized. He apologized for that, said he would call his friend Scott Frost after the game and let him know. So you don't want to burn that bridge in case the Big Ten shuts down again next year, and you need Scott Frost to help you on your crusade to declare war on the Big Ten. So let's talk about the Ohio State offense. Justin Fields, 20 for 21. Passing for 276 yards, 2 touchdowns. The lone incompletion bounced off of the ground. Basically, Olave has it in his hands, goes up, and it looks like it's going to be dangerous or outrageous or spectacular. He hits the ground, the ball bounces out. It looked like it was going to be a touchdown, and it would have been 21 for 21 for 330-some yards and 3 touchdowns, which he would have broken Tate Martell's record at that point for the most completions and most attempts without an incompletion. Of course, he did not because he did have that incompletion, but that's about as good as you can start. And we watched Graham Mertz do some impressive things Friday night. This was impressive as well, and he just looked so comfortable. And you're almost like, why are they even running the ball? They don't need to run the ball. They can just throw it wherever they want. Chris Olave on those comebacks, there's nobody within 10 yards of him. He's actually almost like waiting for defenders to come to him so he can make them miss, and they won't, so he just runs forward and gets tackled. And really, just stop running the ball. There's no reason to do it. You didn't need to do it. It's embarrassing to watch. Just throw the ball because Nebraska had no chance of stopping the passing game other than hopefully you get a sack on 2nd and long to make 3rd and long too difficult for this offense. But, man, Fields looked awesome today.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to look at complaints, I mean, you just ran through all the pros. Like, if you want to look at complaints, there were a couple times when he held the ball too long. Mm-hmm. There was one. He took a couple sacks. There was one in particular where he was just kind of scrambling around in the first half, and it was like it was only a 3-man rush. But if you give a 3-man rush like 9 seconds, eventually they will get there. You cannot stay back in the pocket indefinitely. So and especially the way he was doing it, where he was sort of changing directions a bunch of times, that's real hard on your offensive lineman. So, there was a little bit of the, hanging onto the ball maybe a little too long a few times. And this is the downside of the guy who threw one interception through the first 13 games last year. That's just, if you want to have a quarterback who only throws one interception in 13 games, that means he's not going to throw it if there's not something open. And he's got, he's confident enough in his legs that he can make a play, that he doesn't want to just throw it away. He wants to, try and keep the play alive with his legs, find someone open, or maybe get something on the ground. That's just what his mindset is. There were a couple times that I was like, I don't know if I would have expected them to run him as much as they did. I mean, he ended up with 15 carries. Like that's a lot of contact to be taken the week before Penn State when your backup quarterback is a true freshman, and like that's a lot of contact. And my default assumption with Ohio State football is always that this is going to go back to the Urban Meyer, JT Barrett kind of era, where they would run him 5 times against whoever, UAB or Rutgers or Maryland or whoever, and then they would run him 18, 20 times against Oklahoma, Penn State, games where they absolutely had to have him. They were willing to let him take that contact when they absolutely positively had to have that element of their offense. This was not a game where you had to have that element of your offense. So I was a little surprised at that. I was not really surprised that they trying to run the ball. They want to, they want to establish the run. They know they're going to need the run next week. They're not going to be able to just wing it around 60 times next week at Penn State and walk out with a win necessarily. But they're going to have to run the ball then. So they want to sort of get it established, get it figured out this week. You don't want to completely abandon that because you didn't need it today, but you're going to need it in the future.
Well, and just looking at this, the sack-adjusted rushing yards, they ran the ball for 243 yards, which sure didn't. It wasn't an easy 243, let's say it that way. And I do think Fields ran the ball so much because they needed yards. They needed to be able to establish some sort of running game. And, he finished 15 for 54. And you take out however many yards from sacks, 20 or 30.
Yeah, he had 75 yards gained and then lost 21 on sacks. So
I think they definitely needed him running the ball, which is part of maybe a larger issue. But like we said, there was issues last year with Florida Atlantic, and Ryan Day said it. It's just in what Davis did as well. The first game is just different. They have no film really. You only have last year's film. You're so used to just facing yourself. And then so now you're finally facing somebody else who is actively trying to stop you in many different ways, many of which you have not seen yet because they have literally not shown that to you. And so you're adjusting, you're trying to deal with all of these tactics to keep you from running the ball. And they worked. And now things got better in the second half. I don't have a breakdown of the first half rushing versus the second half rushing. I don't know if you do with any of the paper there. But things did get better. Like Steel Chambers, I thought, 4 for 32, he gave them a little bit of a pop. But Sermon and even Master Teague both, like in the second half, things started to open up, and maybe that's just the process of adjusting, imposing your will, that sort of thing. Before we get away from the Justin Fields protecting the ball, one of the questions here, do you all think that Fields did a better job getting the ball out faster, and did the O-line do better in pass protection? I think a lot of these routes that are called are long developing. And so sometimes you're just going to give up a sack. And I think there's a coverage sack, at least 2 coverage sacks in there. And really, I don't know that there's any major breakdowns. And I think you could put 2 of those on Fields, maybe chalk 1 up to just football. But I think they did fine. You can't fault them for at least 2 of those. And I don't know that you can fault them for the 3rd sack, which I'm trying to they may have all been on Fields, actually. But I do wonder when you're 20 for 21 and you don't want to just throw balls away because that hurts your completion accuracy. But I don't think there's anything wrong with going, say, 20 of 23 or 20 of 24. That's not so bad either. And we know Ryan Day applauds Justin Fields when he throws the ball away. And Day said he probably could have thrown a couple away in this game. And certainly that's 2 of those sacks there. So I think the offensive line, in terms of pass protection, was okay. Wyatt Davis wasn't happy about it, though.
Yeah. And first of all, I've got to take issue with you calling Justin Fields a selfish player right there. I think he's interested in more than just his personal statistics. I mean, I'm just saying, I think that was an incorrect and maybe a little bit mean thing to say. Yet Wyatt Davis talked about the fact that just some stunts and twists and just kind of this is an issue where I think just we're seeing something that was a little different than what they had seen all summer, and it's different players, it's a different system, it's a different look. They do things differently, and Ohio State defensive front obviously more talented than Nebraska's, but the Ohio State offensive line has seen the Ohio State defensive line plenty. They kind of know, okay, these are the moves this guy's going to try because I know he has, 4 moves and I have seen them all in practice 1,000 times. You don't have that with Nebraska. This is a little bit of a feeling out adjustment process. And that's, again, I think there was some concern with the run game and not being able to. I mean, I was expecting to see Ohio State driving Nebraska off the ball.
Yep.
And I didn't see that. That was a little bit concerning, I think. Ryan Day did not sound super concerned. And I'm just going to go through the quarter rushes and yards for Ohio State. First quarter, 14 carries, 52 yards. That's fine. I mean, it's 3-something yards a carry, which is not great, but it's not terrible. Second quarter, 10 for 38. I can do the math there, 3.8 yards per carry.
Good job.
Third quarter, 10 for 64, 6.4 yards per carry. And fourth quarter, 14 for 68. And it was just, there was not a quarter where they had a huge run. They did not have that 70-yard run today to kind of, shoot those statistics up a little bit. And there were times that it was they should be moving this line a lot more than they did. And there was a time in the first quarter when it was 4th and 1 at maybe their own 30, and it was oh, come on, you don't need to punt here. Go, you have run it behind Wyatt Davis. This guy's back. This guy's an All-American. This guy's going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. Run it behind Wyatt Davis. And Day punted it away once. He had another opportunity like that a little later. Guess what they did? They ran it behind Wyatt Davis. And guess what happened? They got a first down. That's something that if you can steal, I mean, that's basically stealing a possession. If you look back at the game and that had been a fake punt or an onside kick, that would be this super memorable play that was that really changed the whole game. Just don't give up a possession, and it's the same thing as getting a possession. If it's 4th and 1, go for it. Even if you're in your own 40, go for it. That's fine. And if it's 4th and 5 or 6 on the plus side of the 50, go for it. This is not a team that needs to be kicking field goals and punting this year. That's something that got them in the playoff last year against Clemson. They need to not fall into that trap again this year. This is the first time I've ever talked about not wanting to kick or punt on 4th down on this show ever.
The field goal I think was okay, because that ended up being a 4th and 6 after the motion call. Although I still think Fields got the first down before that 4th down play. I think that was a bad spot, of which there were a couple of bad spots in this game. Yeah, certainly some missed calls from the refs. One helped Ohio State. Justin Fields' knee was down on one play that he gained a few yards and then ended up hitting Garrett Wilson for the 42-yarder shortly afterwards, but it still feels like that was going to happen anyway. Mm-hmm. And while we are talking about Garrett Wilson, man, how about Garrett Wilson? We've been talking about him quite a bit, saying he's going to lead the team in receptions. Tom, I think before this game, you even said he's going to have 7 for 120 with a couple of touchdowns. Mm-hmm. You were way off because he only had 1 touchdown, 7 catches, 129 yards, 7 targets, 7 catches. And that's really what Garrett Wilson does. That dude catches the ball. And man, he's in the right spot for this offense and for what he does. And I don't know if he's going to be a slot receiver in the NFL. I don't care. But what he's doing right now, this is exactly 18.4 yards out of your slot guy. when in the past they get maybe half of that from KJ Hill in 2 of the last 3 years. And now that guy, not only does he move the chains, because they went to him on 3rd down, I think maybe 3 times, and you can just watch him just going across the middle and dragging until he clears the linebacker, and Justin Fields is just standing back there waiting for him to clear the linebacker, and then he does, and boom, it's 12 yards, it's 16 yards, it's 24 yards, depending on whether there's another defender over there. And it's you just know that it's coming on these 3rd downs where it's like, well, here comes, they're going to find Garrett Wilson here, and they're going to move the chains, and this is just what it's going to be this year. And if you're going to replace the school's all-time leading receiver, this is the guy you do it with.
Yeah, I think the Garrett Wilson in the slot experiment may be at least worth continuing to keep an eye on. Like,
let's see what the film looks like.
Don't shut it down just yet, I think was my takeaway there. Yeah, between us spending the entire offseason gassing up Garrett Wilson in the slot and gassing up Jackson Smith and Jigba as the breakout impact freshman, feeling pretty good about our insights on the show over the last few. Again, normally you don't want to read too much into the first game. In this case, read everything into the first game. We are extremely smart. You are welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Garrett Wilson, the interesting thing to me was he averaged 18.4 yards per catch. He didn't have like a 75-yarder to skew that number. It was just a bunch of 12, 15, 18. He had a 24. He had a 42. I mean, it was just like very consistently. It was catch and run. And, I think people are going to look at the box score and go, what's wrong with Jameson Williams? Because he had only 1 catch for 7 yards. And the answer is Nebraska, the other red and white team. Geez Louise, I almost did it again. Nebraska.
Do you need a moment, Tom?
Yeah. He was constantly clearing out the safeties for those underneath routes. There were at least a couple times when he was taking the corner and then he'd run like a post or something like that, go back towards the center of the field, take the safety with him, and then Olave or Wilson would come across the middle and catch it. And then if they have a step on the cornerback behind them, hey, the safety's not there anymore because he's off chasing Jameson Williams somewhere else in the field. So I think that Nebraska didn't want Jameson Williams to beat them, and he didn't. But the bad news is everyone else did. So, this is we have talked about this being a pick your poison offense. They picked their poison. Guess what? There were other poisons, and now and now they are dead. R.I.P. Nebraska.
So let's talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba. Only had 2 catches, 5 yards. I don't know what the big deal is. He did take a huge hit and was targeted, of course, and got bounced right back up because this dude is tough. Tom, we'll get to the touchdown, but one of the things that impressed me most is that hit he took. The ball goes flying. You could see his eyes on the television following the ball the entire time. Like, that dude is so locked in, like eagle-eyed on the football. Like, he's getting debacled. And while he's going, keys over keister or whatever, his eyes still on that football. Like when, an eagle is coming down to a lake to pick up a trout or whatever, and say it runs into, I don't know, a sparrow, and it goes all, crazy. The eyes never stop, they never leave the target. And that's how it was with him. And it is just an interesting thing that didn't surprise me because of what we know he is. And then we see that, and we knew. It's good that everybody else got to see what we've been saying so long about Jackson Smith and Jigba. And even though 2 catches, 5 yards, that 5-yard touchdown displayed everything that we've talked about. The feel for the game that he has is very Garrett Wilson-like, and he showed it right away where he was so far out of bounds. It was clear he was out of bounds. And yet then it slows back down and you see him get his foot in there. And I tweeted it was very like Lynn Swann-esque. Like, you remember there's the old footage of Lynn Swann who is like 3 yards out of bounds on a deep pass and goes up in the air and yet somehow contorts his body to get like 2 feet in on a play where he's clearly way out of bounds. And granted, it was only 1 foot. But here, man, it was it was good to. I feel so validated, Tom, because I don't normally get to feel like this. But I'm glad people got to see what we've been talking about for so long. And go ahead, your thoughts. Did you think it was a good catch?
It was fine. I mean, like, I do that in the backyard all the time. I mean, it's fine. Like, I mean, it's nice to see someone else do it for a change, I guess. You look at the 2 for 5 and it's like, okay, I mean, it was okay, I guess. Like, he played, that was something. But it reminded me of the Devin Smith catch in the season opener in 2012 against Miami, where Devin Smith was a sophomore, right? Redshirt freshman that year, 2012, Urban Meyer's first game. And Devin Smith had this like leaping one-handed catch. And it's against Miami and who cares? And I think it was in the second half and whatever. But it was just like, okay, so that's in there. And you don't know when that's going to come out again, but it can come out pretty much any time. If it's in there, it can come out. And there are going to be a whole bunch of times. You saw that with Garrett Wilson, his true freshman year last spring, had like a really good leaping catch, taking the ball away from a defender during the spring game. And, you looked at his final stats for that spring game, and I don't remember them being very impressive, but it was like, okay, so that's in there. This was so that's in there kind of play for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, okay, so now he can do that. And, last year, I mean, you know what Devin Smith did a couple of years ago. Devin Smith, turned into the greatest deep ball threat in Ohio State history, quite possibly. With Garrett Wilson last year, it went from that play in the spring game to, you think about the big catch he made, like soaring on the opening drive of the Fiesta Bowl. And he catches it, and he has the presence of mind to get his hand down inbounds because the rest of his body's going to be out of bounds. This was the precursor. This is the backstory, the origin story for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and whatever the heck he's going to do later in the year. It's going to be like, oh, well, we saw he could do something like that because he had that one catch, and yes, it was against Nebraska, and yes, it was in garbage time, but also now you know it's in there. So when is that going to come out again? Like, yeah, I have a feeling it will come out pretty soon at some point. In some exciting moment. But yeah, you saw enough from the freshman. You saw a little bit of Julian Fleming. You saw a little bit of I don't think G. Scott had a catch, but he played. You saw a little bit of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, they're already, think about where Chris Olave was 2 years ago. Nobody was thinking about Chris Olave. Chris Olave was a complete afterthought this time 2 years ago. And then he turned into what Chris Olave turned into. So for these guys to be out there and already doing a little bit of something and not in the closing minutes of a 70-point win over Miami of Ohio, like a Big Ten conference game against Big Ten conference cornerbacks. Okay, yeah, this means something now. Start, not that you haven't been warned to pay attention to these guys, but yeah, pay attention to these guys. I think they might be pretty good.
We'll see. We'll have to look at the film. Chris Olave, 6 catches, 104 yards, got knocked out of the game there. I think that was a stinger, frankly. Okay. That's just my thought from the way he clinched up after he got hit, and Ryan Day said after the game he looked okay, but they'll see more tomorrow. It didn't seem like a concussion thing because I don't know that he even got hit in the head. It was just hit around the neck area, and that's seemed to be what that was. Tom, there's a lot of hard hitting in this game. Not all of it was legal, and I saw Joel Klatt was complaining about maybe the most egregious one. I think maybe the final one where dude launched himself and with the shoulder into another shoulder, and if you're going to launch yourself, like you're just begging to be thrown out of the game, and you have the ability to. I think it was the Jackson Smith and Jigba one, then maybe because like he got laid out, and he could have just gotten tackled, and there was enough cheap shots to where Ryan Day was even asked about it after the game, and Day's quote was basically like, "Well, I don't think they teach that," and he didn't disavow that there were cheap shots. He just said, "I don't think that Nebraska teaches that," and they were certainly physical, and I do think they teach that, and that's perfectly fine, and they should, and they sure came out to hit Ohio State hard, and they did, and still 52-17, but some of those were a little bit excessive.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure that the Nebraska coaches are probably coaching stick and wrap. Use your arms during tackling. That's an important part of the process. And there were a whole bunch of guys not doing that. There were a whole bunch of guys that looked like they were going for kill shots, and that's not really what I'm sure they're coached to do. But and this is an Ohio State team where you can do that, but if you don't wrap up these receivers, you don't wrap up these running backs, like sometimes these guys can bounce off of it and keep going. So that's not a great idea. It's not a great idea from a safety perspective. It's not a great idea from a playing defense perspective either. There were a couple of those targeting calls. I think there were four of them called, and two of them actually stood up under review, I believe. And there were a couple of them that were like, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go the textbook definition, like, yeah, I could see them maybe calling it, but they shouldn't call it because obviously, clearly there's no intent there. But I mean, like you said, there's certain stuff you can do that is basically makes it very difficult for them to call you. Like, don't launch yourself, don't dip your head. You don't do those two things, you're going to go a long way towards not getting called for targeting. And I would guess that the Nebraska players are not being coached to dip their heads, not being coached to launch themselves. So, yeah, I think you might have seen. This is the first game. Not everyone has had the full off season of contact and tackling practice that they probably would have during a normal year, and that's going to manifest itself in some sloppy tackling and missed tackles, and it's also going to manifest itself in just some poor form tackles, which can sometimes lead to targeting. So, I think that's maybe more of a result of that than anything else.
And we'll start to wrap up here because you're going to have to get out of there here shortly. But one mention here on the chat: Penn State getting beat by IU right now. Are they looking ahead? Penn State is down 17-7.
Ooh.
With 10:43 to play in the third. Penn State has the ball at their own 17. Tom, I'll do some play-by-play. It's 3rd and 9, and Sean Clifford drops back, and it's a completion. It's a first down. So that's what's going on there. We did not mention, I don't believe, Haskell Garrett. And we should definitely mention Haskell Garrett. I'm looking at the stats here.
I wrote about him. I can tell you all about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Because, I mean, that was one of the most frustrating things about this, Tom, is that Haskell Garrett is doing all of this stuff, and TV has, like, no clue, like, what he's been through, apparently. They didn't mention it until, like, later in the game when I think all of Twitter is like, hey, do you guys even understand what Haskell Garrett has been through and what just happened a couple months ago? And now he's here. And like, if Haskell Garrett wasn't in this game, I think it's closer than 52-17.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and just for people who have somehow missed the Haskell Garrett backstory, he was on the night of early morning hours of Sunday, August 30th, was out, walking home from a teammate's house, and saw a man and a woman in an altercation. Stepped in to try and kind of break the fight up, and the guy pulled out a gun and shot him in the face. And there was, I think it was, that's not great. You do not want that to happen to you. And he ended up he was in the hospital for a couple days. He was, as of 3 weeks ago, still not cleared to play. And I think that when the availability report came out on Friday and his name was not on it, I think we all kind of went, really? Like, really? He's going to play? And then he played. And I don't know exactly how many snaps he played. Ryan Day was asked about him and said he honestly, like he said, I don't know how much he played, but he was in the second quarter when right after Ohio State kicked the field goal to go up 17-14. Nebraska started with a delay of game to start that drive, so now it's 1st and 15. I think they had an incomplete pass, so it's 2nd and 15. And then Haskell Garrett picks up a sack, a 5-yard sack, so all of a sudden it's 3rd and 20. And 3rd and 20 is not a play you're going to pick up very often. And so they don't pick that up. They punt it. Ohio State scores before the half. They get the ball back right after half. They score again. Then they have the Seven Banks scoop and score, and all of a sudden it's gone from 17-14 to 38-14. But that Haskell Garrett play was a huge part of that process. But so just that alone was a big play. But I asked Kerry Combs about it after the game, and he said after the game gave Haskell Garrett a big hug and said, this is a miracle. It is a miracle that he was out there as soon as that he has gone through this, he has survived being shot in the face. I mean, that you hear that, and it's like, that could be life altering or life ending, depending on where that bullet goes through. And this just went through and through on his cheeks, apparently. And so he's had, he's had some, some procedures to get it, sort of cleaned up and get to the point where he can be back out there. And, I think there's a psychological element of that as well that people had talked about over the summer, like that, it would be reasonable to have some nightmares after that kind of thing. But here he is less than 2 months later, not only out on the field, but actually contributing and making arguably one of the biggest plays of the game on defense. And also, maybe most important, I mean, other than, obviously his health is the most important thing, but this is a position that we have talked about as the biggest position of need, that interior defensive line, both 3-tech and nose spots. But the depth there, just the questions about the depth there, because Haskell Garrett was expected to be a contributor inside. Deron Vincent was expected to be a contributor inside. Both of those guys, Vincent has just his rehab has not been, as quick as they probably would have hoped. And Garrett, with the shooting, all of a sudden it was like two of the potential contributors inside were all of a sudden like, oh, you don't know when these guys are going to be back. And for him to be back game one and, game one, half one, not just playing, but making a major impact play, that's a huge deal for this team. Because even if I don't know, I mean, I wasn't keeping a snap count on him today, but, even if he only played 15, 20 snaps, something like that, if he could be a 25, 30 snap guy next week against Penn State, that makes a big difference, because that is going to be, they are going to need to be real stout on the interior of that defensive line against Noah Cain and that Penn State rushing attack. He potentially provides them some answers there that, 24, 48 hours ago, I don't think that we necessarily thought that they would have.
Yeah, we were skeptical about the availability report when it came out. And even before the game, he was running with the 3s and the 4s in the warm-ups. And then, you see him out there pretty quickly, and then he makes an impact. So that was really great to see. And as you said, Tom, you wrote about it, so go find that front page of the Buckeye Scoop. And Tom, let's go ahead and let that wrap up for us. 52-17, Ohio State wins. Anything else before we go, though, Tom? Any last words? Anything that just stood out for you?
Just how nice it was to be back at the stadium. I mean, just how nice it was to have, not exactly normalcy, definitely not normalcy, but, this is Ohio State football for people in Ohio is probably this is like a touchstone for the year. A major milestone for the year is the start of the Ohio State football season. And this is a season that looked for all the world like it was not going to happen at all. Like, and I had said a few times, I was not 100% sold on the fact that this really was going to happen until the ball left the tee in Ohio Stadium. Well, now there's one game down, and you're going to have people who are going to gripe and complain about the fact that, well, who will say they'll even be able to get in all 9 games that they're supposed to play? Like, okay, if they don't, then they don't, and cross that bridge when you come to it. They have gotten 1 game in, and that is more than we expected, a month and a half ago. So that was pretty nice that, you can focus on all the stuff that was weird and all the stuff that was different, or you can just sort of appreciate it for what it was. And hey, this is an Ohio State football season.
Yeah. And
we all made it.
and if everything ends up going to hell, then, those writers can celebrate it and be happy about it because something has finally gone the way they wanted, and good for them. But until then, let's just keep talking about football and watching football. I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm sure that's what you're going to do. We want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Reminder to check everything out at BuckeyeScoop.com because there's a bunch of stuff. I saw Mark Givler already had his 10 thoughts about what he saw. There's Haskell Garrett story up there. I've got the post-game reaction from the coaches and players. We'll have videos. There's a game story up there as well, and I'm working on a Garrett Wilson story right now. So, and that's just tonight. And so there'll be more stuff throughout the weekend. Thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you later.